The airport terminal buzzed with chaos. A single dad pilot sat quietly in the back row. Worn uniform, faded backpack. Nobody noticed him. The gate agent called names, skipping right over him. VIP travelers brushed past without a glance. Near the boarding gate, voices rose. A foreign family panicked at the counter, trapped by language barriers. Airport staff gestured helplessly. Other passengers looked away. Nobody stepped forward. The single dad stood up. He opened his mouth. The words that came out, not English. The entire area went silent, and everything was about to change. Ethan Cole was 41 years old, single dad, former military pilot. He now worked contract flights, short-term gigs that paid just enough. Today he was taking his daughter Lily, 8 years old, to visit her grandmother. Ethan had chosen economy seats to save money. Lily sat beside him, clutching her favorite book about airplanes. She looked up at her dad with those wide brown eyes that reminded him of her mother. Ethan smiled and squeezed her hand. They were okay. They had each other. The airport terminal was a different world. A world where uniforms meant nothing unless they were crisp and new. Ethan's pilot jacket had seen better days. The patches were faded. His backpack was military surplus, practical but old. To everyone else, he looked like just another tired traveler. Nobody knew what that uniform really meant. At the gate, the boarding process began. First-class passengers lined up at the priority lane. Elite status members got their names called with a smile. Ethan watched from his seat in the back. He'd flown missions in war zones. He'd landed planes in sandstorms. He'd brought soldiers home through enemy fire. But here, none of that registered. He was just another guy in row 32. Lily tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, how come we don't get to go in that special line?" Ethan looked down at his daughter. "We're okay right here, sweetheart. We'll get on the plane just fine." She nodded and went back to her book. Ethan had learned not to expect recognition. After leaving the military, everything changed. He'd made the choice to be there for Lily after his wife Sarah died 3 years ago. Cancer had taken her fast. Lily needed stability. She needed her father. So Ethan left active duty and took contract work. Flexible hours, lower pay, no glory. But he could pick Lily up from school. He could be there for bedtime stories. He could be the parent she needed. Out here in the civilian world, nobody knew his story. Nobody knew about the commendations in his drawer. Nobody knew about the lives he'd saved. And that was fine. Ethan didn't need applause. He just needed to be a good dad. Near the boarding gate, a commotion started. A family had approached the counter. Middle Eastern, Ethan guessed. A mother, a father, and 2 young children. They were speaking rapidly in a language Ethan recognized, but most Americans wouldn't. The gate agent looked confused. She smiled politely, but clearly didn't understand. The father tried again, gesturing at his phone. The mother's voice rose with stress. One of the children started crying. The gate agent's smile faded. She looked around for help. Other passengers in line began to shift impatiently. Someone muttered about holding up the line. Another passenger whispered loud enough to be heard, "Why don't they just speak English?" Ethan felt Lily tense beside him. She'd heard it too. She looked up at her father, questions in her eyes. Questions about fairness. Questions about kindness. Ethan watched the scene unfold. The family was clearly desperate. A missed connection, maybe. Something urgent. The gate agent was trying her best, but frustration crept into her voice. She spoke slower, louder, as if volume would create understanding. It didn't work. It never did. A manager appeared from a back office. He assessed the situation quickly. This was a problem, a delay. He reached for his radio, probably to call security. The mother saw this and her face crumpled. She clutched her children closer. The father held up his hands, trying to explain. But the language barrier was a wall neither side could climb. Around them, other passengers averted their eyes. Some checked their phones. Others pretended to read. Nobody wanted to get involved. The silence wasn't just absence of sound. It was active avoidance. It was collective discomfort turning into something uglier. The family stood there, isolated in a crowd of hundreds. Ethan felt Lily's small hand slip into his. She didn't say anything. She just looked at him. That look said everything. "Daddy, can you help? Daddy, this isn't right." Ethan took a slow breath. He'd spent his whole adult life helping people in impossible situations, but he'd also learned when to stay out of things, when to let the system work, when to trust that someone else would step up. He waited. 30 seconds passed. Nobody moved. The manager's hand was still on his radio. Ethan stood up. Lily held his hand tighter. He walked toward the gate counter. 20 pairs of eyes followed him. Another tired passenger, getting impatient, they probably thought. Ethan reached the counter. He looked at the family. He looked at the gate agent. He looked at the manager, and then Ethan Cole opened his mouth and spoke in perfect Arabic. But that moment hadn't come yet. Before Ethan stood up, there were 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes. 30 seconds where humanity failed a simple test. The family at the counter was unraveling. The mother's hands trembled as she showed the gate agent her phone. On the screen was their itinerary, a connecting flight. Their original flight had been delayed. Now they were here, desperate to get on this one, but their names weren't on the manifest. The gate agent squinted at the phone. She couldn't read the Arabic text. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Do you have your confirmation in English?" The father tried to explain. His English was broken. "Please, we must flight. Children, we must go." He pointed at the departure board. The gate agent's patience was thinning. "Sir, if your names aren't on my list, I can't let you board. You need to go to the main ticketing desk." She pointed across the terminal. The mother understood. She started crying. Quiet, exhausted tears from hours of travel and mounting fear. They'd already been to 3 desks. Each one had sent them somewhere else. Now they were running out of time. The children sensed their mother's distress. The younger one wrapped his arms around her leg. The older child, a girl around Lily's age, stood frozen, looking for help that wasn't coming. The manager arrived. Kevin, thin, 50s, expression that said he'd rather be anywhere else. He assessed the situation. Language barrier, booking issue, boarding time approaching, flight delay. "Folks, I need you to step aside. We have other passengers who need to board." The father tried again. "Please, sir, we have tickets." He fumbled with his phone. Kevin glanced at the screen. Arabic text. He looked away. "I can't read that. You need to go to customer service." The father's face fell. By the time they got there, this plane would be gone. The mother knew it too. She spoke rapidly to her husband in Arabic. Her voice was breaking. Lily heard everything. She watched the little boy clinging to his mother. She watched the girl trying to be brave. Lily knew what it felt like to be scared. She'd felt that way when her mom got sick. Around them, other passengers grew restless. A businessman checked his watch loudly. A woman pulled out her phone. Someone said, "Can we just board already?" Another voice, quieter but sharp. "They should learn English if they want to travel here." A few people nodded. Nobody challenged it. The gate agent looked uncomfortable but didn't intervene. Kevin heard it too. He reached for the radio clipped to his belt. "Security." The father saw it. His eyes went wide. "No, please, no security. We are not problem. We have tickets. We just need help." Kevin's hand was on the radio. "Sir, I need you to calm down and step back." The mother pulled her children closer. The little boy was crying now. The girl stood very still, the way children do when they're trying to disappear. The crowd watched. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked annoyed. Nobody moved. This wasn't their problem. This wasn't their family. This wasn't their responsibility. The silence was deafening. It was the sound of people choosing comfort over compassion. The sound of strangers deciding that someone else's crisis wasn't worth their time. The sound of a family being reduced to an inconvenience. Ethan sat 20 feet away and felt that silence like a weight. He'd seen this before. Different countries, different languages, same result. People forgot that confusion wasn't defiance, that desperation wasn't aggression, that not speaking English didn't mean not deserving dignity. Lily's hand tightened in his. She didn't understand all of it, but she understood enough. Something was wrong. People needed help. Nobody was helping. She looked up at her father. Daddy. That was all she said. One word. But Ethan heard everything behind it. The question, the plea, his daughter asking him to be the person she believed he was. Ethan took a breath. He'd promised himself he'd stay out of it. Just be a regular passenger. Just a dad taking his kid to see grandma. Nothing more. But Lily's hand reminded him of something. Being a good dad wasn't just about protecting your own child. It was about showing your child what kind of world you wanted them to live in. Ethan stood up. The movement caught a few eyes. People probably expected him to complain about the delay. Instead, Ethan walked to the counter. Slowly, calmly. Lily stayed close. Kevin turned to face him. Sir, we'll begin boarding shortly. Please return to your seat. Ethan didn't respond to Kevin. He looked at the family. At the father's exhausted face. At the mother's tears. At the terrified children. Ethan spoke, and the language that came out was fluent, clear, and unmistakably Arabic. The father's head snapped up. His eyes went wide. An American man in a faded pilot jacket speaking perfect Arabic. Ethan's voice was calm. I can help translate. Tell me what happened. The father's relief was overwhelming. Words poured out. Their original flight from Detroit was delayed 4 hours. By the time they landed in Chicago, their connection was gone. They'd been rebooked twice, each flight canceled. The airline sent them here, said there might be seats, but the system showed nothing. They had tickets, confirmation codes, but their names disappeared from the manifest. They just needed someone to look deeper. The mother added details through tears. Her sister's wedding in Jordan. The children hadn't seen their cousins in 3 years. Her elderly father was waiting. This was family. Ethan listened. Then he turned to Kevin and the gate agent. He switched to English. Professional. Precise. Their original flight was delayed by mechanical failure. The system didn't properly transfer their seat assignments. The confirmation code is here. He held up the phone. Check the master passenger list and cross-reference with the rebooking queue. They're not trying to board without tickets. They're claiming seats they already paid for. Kevin blinked. The gate agent's expression shifted. Ethan continued. The mother is traveling with a child who needs medication at specific times. The delay pushed them past their safety window. They need to be on this flight. The terminal went silent. Every passenger watched. Kevin's hand moved from his radio. Check the rebooking queue. She typed rapidly. Oh, here they are. The seat assignment didn't process. It's a system error. They should have been assigned seats an hour ago. Kevin's jaw tightened. Embarrassment. Get them boarded. First available seats. The gate agent nodded. I'm so sorry. We'll get you on this flight right away. The father turned to Ethan. Spoke in Arabic. Thank you. You saved us. Ethan responded quietly. You don't need to thank me. I'm sorry you had to go through this. The mother squeezed Ethan's hand. The children looked at him like a superhero. The little boy had stopped crying. Around them, shame rippled through the crowd. People who'd looked away couldn't meet anyone's eyes. The businessman put his phone away. The woman looked at her shoes. The person who'd said they should learn English found the carpet fascinating. Lily stood beside her father, her eyes shining with pride. An older man stepped forward. That was remarkable. How many languages do you speak? Ethan's answer was simple. Enough. The man looked at Ethan's jacket more carefully. The patches, the insignia. You're military, or you were. Ethan didn't answer. He started to turn back to his seat, but another voice cut through. Captain Cole? A pilot in full uniform emerged from the jetway. Early 30s. He stared at Ethan with awe. Captain Ethan Cole? Sir, is that you? Ethan nodded once. The younger pilot's face lit up. He turned to the crowd. This man flew some of the most dangerous missions in the Middle East. Rescue operations, humanitarian airlifts. He learned languages to save lives. Ethan's voice was quiet. That's not necessary, but the pilot continued. I read about you in training, a village under siege. You flew in without military escort because the weather was too dangerous. You negotiated with 3 militia groups in 3 different dialects to get civilians out. 47 people saved that day. The crowd was frozen. The pilot kept going. You were awarded commendations from 4 countries. You learned Arabic, Pashto, Farsi, and Kurdish. Not from books, from the people you protected. You said if you were going to fly over their homes, you owed them the respect of speaking their language. Kevin's face had gone pale. The gate agent had tears in her eyes. Ethan looked at the pilot. You done? The pilot nodded. Ethan turned to the crowd. His voice carried. I learned those languages because I was tired of watching people die from miscommunication. Tired of seeing fear in people's eyes when they couldn't make themselves understood. Language isn't a weapon, it's a bridge. And if you can build a bridge instead of a wall, you build the bridge. He looked at Lily. My daughter shouldn't grow up in a world where people are punished for not speaking the right language. She should grow up where we try harder to understand each other. Silence, then someone started clapping. Slowly, others joined. The businessman, the woman, the gate agent, Kevin. But Ethan held up his hand. The clapping stopped. Don't applaud me. I didn't do anything special. I did what anyone should do. That family needed help. They deserved dignity. That's not heroism. That's basic humanity. He took Lily's hand. Excuse me. We need to board. The younger pilot called after him. Sir, why are you flying commercial? Why aren't you still in service? Ethan stopped. He didn't turn around. Because my daughter needed her father more than the Air Force needed another pilot. A choice I'd make every single day. He walked to row 32. Lily sat beside him. She leaned against his shoulder. Daddy, you're amazing. Ethan kissed her head. No, sweetheart. I just spoke a language. You're amazing for reminding me why it matters. The family boarded. As they passed Ethan's row, the father stopped. He placed his hand over his heart. Deepest respect. Ethan returned it. No more words needed. Some things transcended language. The plane began boarding. Order restored. But everything had changed. The crowd that watched a family be humiliated now had to sit with their silence. Some would forget by tomorrow, but some would remember. And maybe next time they'd speak up sooner. The boarding process resumed, but the atmosphere had changed. Kevin approached Ethan before he could sit down. The manager's face showed genuine remorse. Captain Cole, I need to apologize for how that family was treated and for not recognizing who you were. Ethan's response was measured. You don't need to apologize to me for who I am. You need to apologize to them for who they are. Human beings who deserve respect from the start. Kevin nodded. You're right. He paused. I'd like to offer you and your daughter an upgrade. First class. Ethan looked at Lily. She was watching him, learning. No, thank you. We're fine where we are. Kevin seemed surprised. Are you sure? I'm sure, but I appreciate the offer. What I would appreciate is making sure that family gets help with their connecting flight. Someone who speaks their language meeting them at the gate. Kevin pulled out his phone. I'll make the call right now. Thank you. Ethan moved to walk away, but Kevin stopped him. Captain, why did you decline the upgrade? Ethan glanced at row 32. Because my daughter needs to understand that doing the right thing isn't about getting rewards. It's about being able to sleep at night. Kevin stood there as Ethan walked away. At row 32, Ethan helped Lily stow her backpack. She climbed into the window seat. Other passengers filed past. Some made eye contact. Some nodded. Some looked away, still carrying their shame. One woman stopped. Older, 60, with kind eyes. A CEO type. She'd been sitting 3 rows ahead. I watched everything. I speak some Arabic. Not fluently, but enough. I could have helped. I didn't. Ethan waited. I told myself it wasn't my problem. That someone else would step in. She met his eyes. I was wrong. And I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me. Next time, step in sooner. The woman nodded. I will, I promise. She hesitated. Why did you speak up? You could have stayed in your seat. Ethan looked at Lily. His daughter was looking out the window, but he knew she was listening. My daughter asked me to, not with words, with her eyes. She was watching that family. She was watching everyone do nothing. And she looked at me. That was enough. The woman followed his gaze. You weren't just helping that family. You were teaching her. I was showing her what I want her to be. Someone who doesn't wait for permission to do the right thing. The woman's eyes glistened. Your daughter is lucky. I'm lucky to have her. She reminds me to be better. The woman moved to her seat. The plane continued to fill. The family Ethan had helped walked past. As they passed row 32, each placed their hand over their heart. The father mouthed, "Thank you," again. The little girl, Lily's age, stopped. She pulled something from her pocket, a small bracelet made of colorful beads. She held it out to Lily. Lily looked at her father. Ethan nodded. Lily took it. "Thank you," she said softly. The girl smiled. She didn't speak English. Lily didn't speak Arabic, but the exchange needed no translation. The girl's mother guided her forward. Lily examined the bracelet. Simple, handmade. "Daddy, she gave me her bracelet." "I saw that." "Why?" Ethan helped her fasten it. "Because kindness creates connection. You smiled at her earlier, when everyone else was looking away." She remembered. Lily touched the beads. "I wish I could tell her thank you in her language." "You just did, in the language that matters most." The flight attendants prepared for departure. The cabin lights dimmed. Passengers settled. Some read. Some closed their eyes. The incident was over. Life moved on. But something had shifted. No cameras had recorded it. No social media posts would make it viral. No news outlets would cover it. Just a moment in an airport. A man speaking a language when it mattered. A system that briefly worked correctly. A crowd that learned something uncomfortable. Power hadn't shifted because someone demanded it. It shifted because someone quietly demonstrated what power should be used for. Not elevation, not recognition, not reward. Protection, dignity, bridge building. Ethan buckled his seatbelt. Lily leaned against him. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart. When I grow up, I want to learn lots of languages too." Ethan smiled. "We'll start whenever you're ready." "Can we start tomorrow?" "Tomorrow sounds perfect." The plane pushed back from the gate. Row 32. Nothing special. But on this flight, it held a father teaching his daughter the most important lesson. That you don't need a fancy seat to make a difference. You just need to care enough to try. The flight was smooth. 3 hours in the air. Lily dozed against her father's shoulder for most of it. The bracelet on her wrist caught the light every time she moved. When she woke, she was quiet, thoughtful. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" Ethan looked down at her. "Always." Why were people so mean to that family? Ethan took a breath. "How do you explain casual cruelty to an 8-year-old? How do you explain fear disguised as inconvenience?" "They weren't trying to be mean, sweetheart. They were scared." "Scared of what?" "Of things being different, of not understanding. Sometimes when people don't understand something, they get uncomfortable. And instead of trying to understand, they just want it to go away." Lily processed this. "But you understood." "I learned to understand. That's different." "How?" "By listening. By spending time with people who were different from me. By remembering that everyone has a story, even if I can't hear it right away." Lily touched the bracelet. "That girl didn't speak English, but she gave me this. I think I understood her anyway." Ethan smiled. "You did. You understood the most important thing, that she wanted to connect, that she was grateful, that kindness speaks louder than words." Words are powerful though, right? That's what you always say. Words are incredibly powerful, but only when they're used to build bridges. When they're used to exclude people, they become walls. Lily was quiet for a moment. "I want to learn her language, and lots of other languages too." "Why?" Ethan already knew, but he wanted to hear her say it. "So nobody ever feels alone like that family did. So I can help. Like you helped." Ethan's chest tightened. This was why he'd left the military. This was why he chose contract work and economy seats and sacrificed everything. So his daughter could grow up believing the world was worth making better. "That's a beautiful reason, Lily. Will you teach me?" "I'll teach you everything I know. And we'll learn new languages together." The plane began its descent. Outside the window, lights appeared below. Their destination, Lily's grandmother would be waiting. Tomorrow they'd have pancakes. They'd go to the park. They'd live a normal, quiet life. But tonight something had shifted in Lily. Ethan could see it. She'd witnessed helplessness. She'd witnessed indifference. And then she'd witnessed her father choose differently. That lesson would stay with her longer than any language he could teach. The plane landed. Passengers gathered their belongings. The family Ethan had helped was near the front. As the cabin door opened, the father turned back one more time. He caught Ethan's eye, placed his hand over his heart. Ethan returned the gesture. The family exited, gone into whatever came next, but not alone. Not anymore. Someone had seen them. Someone had spoken for them. And somewhere in their story, they'd remember the man in the faded pilot jacket who refused to look away. Ethan and Lily were among the last to exit. Row 32 always was. They walked through the terminal. Lily held her father's hand, the bracelet on her wrist. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart." "When we get home, can I draw a picture of today?" "Of course. What will you draw?" "You, standing with that family, with words coming out of your mouth in bubbles. Lots of different languages." Ethan smiled. "That sounds perfect. I'm going to put it on the refrigerator." "I'd be honored." They walked toward baggage claim. Just another father and daughter at the end of a long day. Nobody looked twice. Nobody knew what had happened at that gate. Nobody knew the lesson that had been taught. But in 20 years, maybe 30, Lily would speak to someone who needed help. She'd remember this day. She'd remember her father standing up when everyone else sat down. And she'd do the same. That was how the world changed. Not with grand gestures, not with applause, but with quiet moments. With a father teaching his daughter, with words spoken at the right time, with the decision to build a bridge instead of a wall. They found Lily's grandmother waiting. Warm hugs, questions about the flight. Normal life resumed, but nothing was quite the same, because Ethan had shown his daughter something that night. That invisible people are only invisible when we choose not to see them. That language is a gift, not a barrier. That one person speaking up can change everything. And that sometimes the most important thing a father can teach his daughter is simply this. When you see someone who needs help, you help. Not for recognition, not for reward, but because it's right, because it's human, because that's the world worth living in. If this story moved you, follow Daddy Healing Stories for more powerful tales about fathers teaching their children what truly matters. Sometimes the greatest lessons are learned in the quietest moments. Subscribe to never miss a story that reminds us all what it means to be human.